Good evening. Welcome to the Milford Township Municipal Building and the monthly Planning Commission meeting. These on? They're on. Yep. Hang on a second. Maybe I can't get that any closer. This time I call the meeting of April 5th, 2022 to order. All please rise and join us in the Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Thank you, thank you. Where was that, on the floor?
Yeah, right underneath the floor.
Thank you. If you haven't done so yet, please sign the attendance sheet in the back for the record. Next, I'd like to introduce the members of the Planning Commission and our support staff. Starting on my far left is Bob Reed. Next to him is Doug Prozan, Scott Stewart, Pete Cabella. On the right side over here, far end there, is Denise Bizarro, the recording secretary. Next to her is Dave Scully, Lynn McCabe, and Tony Sitter. On the right side in the back is Julie Maggio and Matt Puz. They are from the zoning and development officers. And on the left back here is Lydia Caparosa, township council, and Mark Shaw, the township solicitor, and I am Gene Strohmeyer, the planning commission chairman. Before we begin, I'll call for a motion to accept last month's meeting minutes as written.
So moved.
Anyone second?
Second.
Any discussion on it? All in favor?
Aye.
Anyone opposed? All right. Milford Planning Commission is a recommending body that hears testimony, asks and answers questions, deliberates and passes our recommendations on to the Milford supervisors who make the final decisions on the issues brought before us. The subdivision and our land development discussed tonight, if acted on by the Planning Commission, will be considered by the township supervisors at their regular meeting to be held on Tuesday, April 19th, 2022 at 5:30 p.m. in this room here. The first and only item on the agenda for tonight is for Robert and Lee Sessler. It's a small subdivision plan to show the creation of two lots. Parcel A, a 10,999 square foot lot, and parcel B, a 9,375 square foot lot from a lot located at 1647 West Gore Road at the southeast intersection of West Gore Road and Greenwood Street in tract 346. Someone here to represent that? Please come to the podium and give us your name and address, please, sir.
My name is Robert Sessler, and I'm a Mill Creek resident, and I'm here to present the subdivision plan to the board here. My address is 3030 Loveland Avenue, Erie, PA 16506. You want me to express my interest in it, or why I'm here, I guess? Or?
No, just anybody have any questions at all for him?
It all looks in order. We're good.
Okay,
Oh, yeah.
all set?
Yep.
Okay, just at this point, it's just a subdivision.
Exactly, right, okay.
You'll be back.
Okay.
Maybe.
I didn't know if I had to go any further on this or not, you know. I'm so used to it, you know.
Okay, thank you, sir.
Okay, sure.
Okay. Yeah, anybody else have any comments to make about that? All right, okay. Do we want to take care of that first? Okay. That's the only item on our agenda for this type of thing tonight. So we're going to vote on making a recommendation for or against this to for the supervisor, so.
I'll make a motion to
Who seconded it? Second. Any discussion amongst the group here? All in favor? Aye. Anyone opposed? Very good, thank you. Okay, under new business tonight, we have the ordinance review. We're gonna make a our formal recommendation for the proposed updated Milford Township zoning ordinance, chapter 145 of the Milford Township Code, in accordance with Act 247 of 1968 as amended the Municipal Planning Code. Sir.
Thank you. I'm Matt Waldinger, Director of Planning and Development for the Township. I'd just like to take a moment to point out some of the changes that have been made to the ordinance since the fall in response to comments that we've received throughout the adoption process. The first changes, as you'll come to them chronologically in the ordinance, are in the definitions, so I'll start there. We did make some modifications involving agricultural uses and activities to respond to some concerns that had been raised. There were questions on how to better address the keeping of traditional farm animals as well as smaller animals such as chickens. Agricultural activities are still viable in areas of the township zoned or to be zoned conservation residential, and so that we felt that some added clarity would be beneficial. Some of the changes include changes to the definitions for agricultural activities and agritourism. We did incorporate backyard poultry into a new section of the ordinance. We added a definition for commercial livestock and poultry operations. We added a definition for farm, a definition for livestock. We added definitions surrounding the non-commercial keeping of chickens, ducks, and livestock, and those were added to the Conservation Residential District. We added a definition of poultry. We added a definition of riding stable and added that as a use in the Conservation Residential District. We added a new section in supplemental regulations to deal with agricultural activities, and we added riding stable also to the supplemental regulations. Moving on, we've modified the definition of continuing care facility to clearly include both assisted and independent living, and we've modified personal support services to clearly include recreation facilities. Under convenience store, we modified those definitions to be more descriptive and also to include reference to EV charging stations so that it's clear that they can be included in a convenience store project. We added definitions for electric vehicle and electric vehicle charging station. The definition for electric vehicle charging station has been decoupled from parking space so that the charging stations now can be placed as desired and will not count towards parking minimums or maximums. We clarified that office and business parks are no longer, are a non-retail use. And we added a definition for the Presque Isle corridor, which we'll get into a little more in depth with the map. Moving beyond the definition section onto district regulations, this is the section that has the most impactful changes. The main change being the merging of mixed use 2 and mixed use 3 into a new mixed use 2 district. This change combined all of the uses that were permitted in the previous 2 districts. We also made the following further changes to zoning districts. One is just an obvious change with the combination of MU2 and MU3. MU3 no longer exists in the code. C2, in the C2 commercial district, we added shopping center neighborhood to make it clear that any shopping center is permitted here regardless of size. In the C3 district, we added manufactured home sales. In the mixed-use 1 district, we added medical marijuana dispensary and multi-establishment center. In the mixed-use 2, we added retail as a use. We also added medical marijuana dispensary and office and business park and retail business establishment. All of those are new additions now in the MU2. Presque Isle Gateway District, we eliminated animal daycare, which was previously in there, and added medical marijuana dispensary. Previously mentioned Presque Isle Corridor consists of properties along West 8th Street from Summerheim to Pittsburgh Drive, to Peninsula Drive, and along Peninsula Drive from West 6th Street south for 300 feet beyond West 8th. We changed the build to a minimum setback throughout the Presque Isle district, except for properties in the Presque Isle corridor. And again, I'll have a map that details that in a moment. There's a build-to line of 10 feet but for the Presque Isle corridor, but it can be moved back to a 20-foot build-to line if the additional area is dedicated as an easement. We fixed an issue where language was not changed regarding the 10-foot build-to line applying to the entire district, just to make it clear that it now only applies to the Presque Isle corridor. In the light industrial district, we added manufacturer home sales, and we did the same in heavy industrial district. Moving on to the general supplemental sign parking regulations, the regulations portion of the ordinance, we made the following changes. Modifications to exterior lighting regulations in response to comments that were received. We added the previously mentioned agricultural uses supplemental regulations. We made changes to convenience store window placement and design to be consistent with the PA Flammable Liquids Act. Under limited lodging, we eliminated the upper time limit that existed for long-term lodging. But we also added a maximum limit of 2 persons per bedroom for limited lodging facilities, and we also added a requirement for smoke alarms to be placed in those facilities. Vehicle fuel station, we modified the setback to simply be 50 feet from the right-of-way and property line to the fuel dispensers, and we did permit EV charging stations, or made clear that they were permitted, I should say, in vehicle fuel station. We modified the outdoor advertising sign section to clarify language, especially around billboards that contain electronic message centers, the digital billboards. We tried to clarify that so that everybody was on the same page. And then we revised parking for targeted corridors to remove the limits to parking in front of the structure, and we changed that to an incentive system that would try and encourage more parking to be placed behind the buildings. So there's no longer a prohibition against parking in the front. We just are trying to incentivize parking in the rear. Moving on to the map changes, I just have a couple slides to run through. First of all is the full township map, the entire map there. You can see the incorporation here of the M2 and MU2 and MU3 districts into a combined MU2 corridor. You'll also notice that there was, although it's hard to see here, the inclusion of the Presque Isle corridor overlay, which you can see better here on this slide. This is a close-up of the Presque Isle Gateway District. So this green outline here, this is the Presque Isle corridor where the 10-foot build-to line would apply. Beyond that, you'll notice that we made 2 map changes. Scott Park and Tracy School and the residents that front on 6th Street here were moved out of the Gateway District and into R1. And then down here, there were some properties on both sides of Peninsula Drive that were moved out of the Gateway District and into the new MU2 district. Moving further west, out on West Ridge Road, this is an area where St. Mary's is. There are a couple of residential complexes that existed out here, multifamily, and so this area was changed from a mixed-use district to R3, low-density residential. Next, moving to Zimmerly Road. This is Zimmerly and Zook. Interchange is here, 79. This parcel here was previously intended to be a mixed-use district. It's now been moved to an R1 residential parcel. And then lastly, this area near Edinburgh and Interchange Road. Here's Edinburgh and Interchange. Peach Street is here in the red. This was changed from mixed use to C2 regional commercial. So that is a brief summary of the changes that have been made to the zoning ordinance, and we look forward to the Commission's recommendation. Thank you.
Thank you. Okay. Anyone in the audience want to come up and speak about this? Sir. He beats you. He beats you too.
Wrestle him.
Look out of guilt. I am Father John Dedish. I have the honor of serving as pastor of St. Jude's Parish at 6th and Peninsula, with about 1,500 families, about 4,000 people I represent. But the comment is in reference to the, obviously, the proposed zoning. Currently, as it stands, first of all, whoever created this whole thing did a tremendous job. It's a lot of work your team put into it, very creative. And most of it is way beyond my ability to understand, but I applaud the work you guys have done. The concern is about the Presque Isle Gateway District, of which we sit in. Currently, we are considered resort commercial, and I'm not sure when that zoning started. We purchased the old Algiers Farm property in 1955, so I didn't realize we were in resort commercial. But that's, as of today, that's what we are in. In the new proposed code for the Presque Isle Gateway District, 145-23, it calls for permitted uses, and there are 21 different category or allowances for the Gateway District, including a ghost kitchen and medical marijuana dispensary. There is no mention of a religious institution or education. I have a large parish and also a school on that property, and I just noticed that the corridor goes right through our properties. I'm not sure what part of the property is in the corridor and what is not. And I'm concerned that that's a huge concern for us. It doesn't affect us now, but with change in the air and at least with schools and churches, it's going to handcuff us in the future. Right now, currently, we're about to begin in the Catholic parishes west of State Street all the way to the Ohio border, looking at feasibility studies, that kind of thing. Should we be combining? Should we be merging? What do we mean doing? So I think St. Jude's is safe. However, if, let's say, theoretically, in 20 years, we reduce this whole section to maybe 3 Catholic churches, if I have to expand St. Jude Church, I wouldn't be allowed to under this current form. Catholic schools is in study, too. The demographics are not good for anybody. People are moving south, whatever else. So right now, we have 6 Catholic schools. If we do a merging of schools, and if we're one of the sites that will be, that could someday maybe fewer schools and more kids, I wouldn't be allowed to expand St. Jude School. Or if we're the ones that aren't chosen someday, I'm limited to what I can do with that school if we want to get into senior citizen housing or whatever else. So I'm suggesting, I'm very concerned that the permitted uses does not include religious institution or educational institutions. It doesn't include medical marijuana. Now, I could sell marijuana out of the back of the church and probably get away with it. And it's not beneath me. That's a huge concern, and I'm hoping your team will be able to reconsider and add that to the Gateway District. I'm not sure the ramifications of the corridor line going through the property, and I'm not sure where that is. Matt?
Father, there's a map right behind you there that you should be able to see a little better. I think it would affect the parcel that you own at the southeast corner of 6th and Peninsula. Yeah, but the rest of the church property, it does not.
Okay, so behind that, what is the south part?
Here.
South, I'm not sure where ours is and where the Will Perkins site. I assume like Perkins is.
Yeah, it's all of, right, so this
Okay. Thank you. Any questions?
Thank you, sir.
Thank you very much.
Mr. Baldwin, one moment before you start. I just wanted to let Father Dedish know that if it were to remain as in the Gateway District and without religious institutions added as a use, you would be what's known as an existing non-conforming use, so you obviously would be allowed to remain for as long as you wish. And you also, under the new code, would be able to expand any of the buildings up to 25% by right, and then if you wanted more than 25%, it would require a variance to do so. But just wanted to let you know that there is opportunity for expansion by right. Yes.
You're on.
Good evening, Greg Baldwin, Baldwin Brothers. It's a beautiful night. I see not that many people are here, so we'll try to make it quick. But as usual, I have handouts.
Is there pictures?
There are no pictures, however. I'm sorry, I may not have enough of them for everyone. But as you know, we have a substantial interest in the revisions to the zoning
I went to
ordinance.
share down there.
We've provided written comments at every possible opportunity to everyone. And I will say, as Father Fiddish mentioned, the township and all the administration has done a really pretty good job generally of incorporating a lot of developers and property owners' comments in the modifications that were made, and most of which are reflected in the September 22nd version of the ordinance. So kudos to everyone for that. We still have some pretty significant concerns with respect to primarily, number one, the addition of some permitted uses within some of the zoning districts. And what I've sort of done with the comments here is limited them somewhat so that there's less commentary about our modifications, because I believe you've seen that already, but it's put in a form that's more like a potential recommendations to the supervisors, so it's fairly limited in length and easier to understand. So if you go through the pages, and I think it starts maybe on the second or third page of the letter we provided, we sort of walk through what we believe are the permitted uses that should be added to the particular districts. Clearly, there aren't as many with this version of our comments as there were previously, because many have been incorporated. But from our perspective, in developing in this community for a long time, and our intent is to continue to develop in the community, we're looking at the limitations within the ordinance as deterrents to development and redevelopment. And in actuality, the intent of the township, the supervisors, and everyone here is to actually spur development, spur redevelopment in an orderly manner, which was intended via the comprehensive plan in ways that clearly better the township. We as developers and people who live in the township want to see that as well, but with some of these limitations and some of these requirements, and I'll get to the Presque Isle District and corridor in a moment, but the end result is going to be a limitation on certain types of uses in certain areas, which reasonably could be argued are appropriate in these certain areas. And you're going to see a lack of development, a lack of redevelopment. You have to realize the comprehensive plan was designed and adopted in 2018. This was pre-pandemic. From a developer's perspective, who's actually on the ground working with occupants, users, people who are buying properties, tenants who we try to bring into town, you have to understand that pre-pandemic, there were a lot of users. The pandemic has, as many people know, they know somebody who has suffered bankruptcy, their business is gone, they've lost their business, and will never reopen again. And what we're seeing in the world is there's fewer and fewer users out there, potential users, for this type of market in particular. We are a middle market. We love our community, but we're not a metropolitan market. We're not a Atlanta, we're not a Charlotte, we're not a New York City. We are a fantastic middle market, Erie, Pennsylvania. Everybody loves the place we live, right? But the last thing we want to do is create limitations and requirements that inhibit the redevelopment and development. So I think, number one, the most simplistic portion of our comments are related to additional permitted uses that we think make a lot of sense in some of the districts, and we would implore the Planning Commission to recommend the addition of those permitted uses. Secondly, with respect to the Presque Isle District and the Presque Isle Corridor, we find the concepts surrounding that to be particularly problematic. So if we take a step back and look at really overall what's happening, Mill Creek Township has $6 million that they're prepared to spend in the Gateway District. They're taking comments on that plan right now. And there's all sorts of pretty pictures of what it should look like and all of that. It's wonderful. Now, on the other hand, we're creating a zoning ordinance that in certain areas, particularly in the corridor, buildings have to be built at 10 feet. So the township's gonna spend $6 million, go through, improve the streets, add landscaping, do all these wonderful and amazing things, and I promise you what's gonna happen is none of the buildings are going to change. To me, this makes absolutely no sense. To the developers who I talk to, it makes absolutely no sense. In the corridor, we're requiring buildings to be built at 10 feet off the right-of-way. This is not a planned community that's 2,000 acres, that's brand new in the middle of Texas. This is Erie, Pennsylvania. We have sort of what we have now. Now the question is, how can we improve upon it? First step, and I love the concept, it's improve the streets, add landscaping, make the area beautiful, and more attractive, and then developers and owners like Chip Reel, and we who now own Joe Roots, can come in and attempt to redevelop these properties in a way that makes sense, without having to tear them down entirely and move them to 10 feet off the right-of-way and build parking behind a building, which in Chip's case, he doesn't even have the depth to do it. And we're on a corner that happens to have a huge arc, and so that's not even addressed in the ordinance, and how do we work that out? And it becomes very complicated. So the question that I think is before the Planning Commission, and the 8 of you represent, in my mind, really the community and what the community interest is in order to provide a recommendation to the supervisors. I think the interest shouldn't be just making the roads pretty and adding landscaping. The interest should really be incentivizing development and redevelopment in an area where the township's already gonna spend $6 million. I think the last thing in the world we need to do is make the restrictions or requirements so difficult that people will not renovate, redevelop, or develop in the corridor or in the Gateway District. This is a really significant issue.
Are you saying mainly the 10 feet rule, or there are numerous things?
Numerous issues.
Yeah.
Primarily related to the build two, 10-foot build two, and then the regulations surrounding parking, which require parking to primarily be in the back of the building.
Now, are these new to you guys, or did you guys discuss this already? Did we not discuss this already?
Yes.
It's been discussed many times.
But so there's no movement on it?
Correct.
Okay,
At this point in time.
okay.
And, you know, the comprehensive plan, the intent of it is really fabulous, as I said. The question is whether or not we are practically taking steps to follow the concept of the comprehensive plan, which in our opinion, as the people on the ground, we are not. So I would implore the Planning Commission to essentially make a recommendation that eliminates the concept of the build two. I would eliminate the concept of the Presque Isle corridor in its entirety. Maintain the Presque Isle district itself, because the two are distinct. Realize the corridor is an area within the Presque Isle district, okay? And eliminate the parking requirements. The parking has to be behind buildings, and those requirements related to that district. Thank you very much for your time.
Thank you.
Any other questions?
I'd have to ditto this, because you have to you want to incentivize people to develop in these areas. And we're not rezoning an empty area. I would like it to be whatever, already hamstrung with what's there. And I think we should take serious consideration to adapting some of these things. I would agree with you.
Any other questions?
Anybody?
Chair, is this time for discussion now about this issue, or are we discussing it now, or are we discussing it part of the vote?
I don't know if we're finished with speakers.
What's that?
I don't know that we are finished with any speakers, so.
Thank you very much for your time.
Thank you.
I appreciate all your time, every time I come out here.
Sir?
I kind of agree with Greg there. My thinking is that as a developer as well, you have to consider, the developer has to consider the cost of construction for those areas. You know, the construction costs, how the building's gonna be laid out, how it's gonna be set. And like Greg was saying about setbacks, my thinking would be, it should be more of a metamorphosis. You should work with private sector on how you're developing, rather than, like, if I remember correctly, when the city did their, when they did their sidewalks and everything, they had to tear it all out because nobody developed the property. Nobody would develop because the corridor eliminated construction. And that's what you've got to consider. You've got to consider before you make a decision whether the private sector is going to come in there and do what you want them to. Because they're the ones who are going to put the money into it. You can spend $6 million and find out it's not working, and you've just thrown that money away. So the key is to work with private sector, like developers like Greg, et cetera, and determine, in other words, there may be buildings where you just can't, just make that established. You might have to work with those developers on that building, or you're going to have it sit there forever. So, like he said, the concept is right, but it has to be done in pieces. You just can't just ramrod your corridor right through with sidewalks and everything and not consider the people's properties that are developed. It'll be a mess. I mean, the thing is your Embrace Mill Creek plan is a good plan over time, but you can't do it all at night. You can't do it overnight. It's got to be done in a procedure that works with the private sector so the buildings can be encouraged to be built. And the big thing is parking. I mean, everything we deal with when we're doing buildings is we have to figure out where we're going to put the parking on all these developments. And some of the areas that Greg was mentioning aren't ready for that kind of parking. Just not going to work. So you might have to maybe grandfather some areas in and then develop it areas that maybe will work in that area, but it has to be done gradually because you're going to be tearing buildings down. It's going to be expensive, and everybody who develops buildings looks at how much it's going to cost to tear a building down before you rebuild it. And these things have to see. As commercial developers, we look at the cap rates on buildings. How much are we going to make? What's going to be returned, and how much are we borrowing the money for, and what's it going to cost us? And if the cost exceeds the return, now right now the environment is a low interest rate environment, so we're able to make these buildings work. But eventually we see inflation rates going up. Interest rates are starting to increase, and that affects the return on developers, people that are going to invest money. So if you want to attract developers in the city of Erie, you have to work with these individuals to make it profitable. If you don't, the buildings will sit there, and you're going to have more blight. People are going to come down and say, "Wow, this looks like a mess," and you'll actually prevent development. Now, I think the Embrace Comprehensive Plan is great.
Yeah.
And we're starting to see it. We're doing the duplexes up there because we have we have the UPMC coming up there. I mean, LECOM, excuse me, in those areas. And so there's areas that we're looking at, and we see that we're working with them. But you have to work with us, the contractors and the developers. If you don't, you're going to be in trouble. So consider that when you make your decision on this.
Okay. Thank you. Any questions for him?
I got a question for Greg. What was the biggest advantage to getting rid of the Presque Isle corridor? What's the disadvantage of having it? It's too restrictive?
Absolutely. There's no question. So let's take Joe Roots as an example.
Yeah.
Okay. So typically, any national tenant or restaurant tenant wants to have their building set back from the street. They want parking in front or around their building, which, by the way, if you look at if you go on Google Earth and look at any restaurant, pick a restaurant in town on Upper Peach Street, you have to have circulation around the building for trash, for just circulation for access, for people to get to cars, to park in different places. They want the circulation. They want people who are driving on the street to see that their restaurant's busy, because then other people come to the restaurant.
That really works? No, just kidding.
It works. This is marketing 101. But the drive-throughs, there's no drive-throughs currently permitted in the Prescott district. Okay, correct, Matt?
That's correct.
Right. That's another issue. 90% of restaurants now, because of COVID, because of the pandemic, want some type of drive-through. Whether it's for customers to come pick up the drive-through, or Uber Eats, or one of the other DoorDash or delivery services to pick up the order through the drive-through window. Right now, that can't happen in that district. So the issue I've had right now, we'll talk solely about this particular property. Number one, I have zero interest in the property at all from any national tenants, and I'm telling you, I have reached out to 1,000 potential tenants on the site. Zero interest whatsoever. Why? Because it's a secondary market as compared to 12th and Pittsburgh, as compared to Peach Street, as compared to Interchange Road. So when some national wants to come into the market, they want to hit those areas rather than 8th and Peninsula. It's a great seasonal market, but not a year-round market. So we're talking about a tertiary market to begin with. One, it's very difficult, and I knew it was when we absolutely, admittedly, know that it was going to be a difficult property to develop, but we also take a lot of pride in our community and a lot of pride in Presque Isle, and we visit the park all the time. We said, if anybody can do this, we probably can. So let's give it a shot. We knew it was going to be hard. Now we're in a situation where it's that much harder. Yes, there's some regulations that allow for some expansion of uses, but when you start talking about dimensional issues, like the 10-foot setback, we're talking about a whole nother issue with non-conforming uses.
I got your point. What is the reason for having it separated into its own definition of core?
Well, because previously, the way it was, you had the 10-foot build-to line applied to the entire Presque Isle Gateway District, which would mean homes on 6th Street, places on 10th, places on Summerheim. That wasn't the intent. The intent was, it was focused on West 8th Street from Summerheim to the west, and then Peninsula Drive from 6th Street just south of 8th. So the reason we made the district was to eliminate the need for the build-to line in those other districts where it really wasn't, or those other areas where it really wasn't warranted. So we narrowed quite considerably where the build-to line applies.
That's it?
That was the reason, yes.
That's the only reason for its own.
Yeah, oh, an overlay, yes.
Right.
And so in the end, so there has been some progress made in the entire district, because otherwise, basically every single structure in the district would have been a non-conforming structure, including the houses down on West 6th Street, including all of these properties in the whole district. So now, we're only dealing with non-conforming structures in the key area that they're trying to incentivize development in, which is absolutely unbelievable. Like, why are we doing this now when we should be going into the district, expending the $6 million, improve the roads, improve landscaping, and create a district that is attractive, and people want to spend time there, and now you can't force the developers first and then bring the people. It doesn't work that way.
Why does that make so much sense to me? But I must be missing something.
I guess, my answer to that is, I can't remember if it's Mr. Baldwin or who mentioned, that this area has been this way, it would have been great if this had happened 50 years ago. The ideal time to do this was 50 years ago.
Right.
The second best time is today. If we don't start, when are we ever going to get to where we want to be?
But we don't want to hinder development of business. You don't want to make that type of mistake, but you think that this isn't going to hinder development. Greg seems to think that it's gonna hinder development in these areas, but you guys don't think that's gonna happen.
I mean, don't assume this is all occurring in a vacuum. There are many tools that the township has and the county has and the state has to assist with development of these areas. And, you know, those are going to be tools that the township will be looking at.
But do we have those tools available now to to the potential developer? I mean, again, you're saying not in a vacuum, but if you're gonna use those tools, what are the tools? What's gonna incentivize a developer to come to Joe Roots to develop that and not have to build within the parameters of this corridor? Do you see what I'm saying on the opposite end? I just,
But-
it looks to me that you don't want to hinder development, and I think it's a mistake to do that, and you want to make things easier to develop, not harder. And if you don't have the people there that want to come in and do something, those places are gonna sit empty, and they're gonna go.
Well, they're empty now,
Correct.
under the current zoning ordinance.
Yes, they are, yeah.
So, I mean, you know,
This is
the,
a difficult time.
the gateway, you know, plan that's currently being reviewed,
Yes.
and that has had a lot of community input that's been up on the website and so forth, is contemplating, you know, this type of concept, where at least in this particular area, you're bringing buildings up towards the street and kind of creating a kind of Main Street downtown type feel for this particular, you know, this particular area.
But I don't think he is the only one that is saying that idea doesn't seem, it might be great theoretically, but it doesn't seem to work. You have to get in, people want to see the cars there, they want to be able to load their product in, they want to be able to do things, and it's not realistic.
But there are a lot of buildings along 8th Street that are already the way we're talking about having them in the future. There's a lot of buildings up close to the street. And they seem to be functioning.
And they're functioning. All right.
Well, they're functioning, however,
Mhm.
if you look at those buildings, they're not really functioning. That's not really
Give
what
me
the
a
township
quick
wants.
example of one of them.
Let's say the Arby's right now. The Arby's, there's other buildings that are a little closer, that are on smaller parcels, a little closer on 8th Street, closer to Peninsula Drive. There's several small buildings there
Yeah.
that are pushed right up against the road.
Yes.
Where the parking is right up against the road
Yeah.
right now. Those parcels aren't very deep at all.
Yeah.
I consider those to be non-functioning properties, technically, right? Not being used for their highest and best use, right? No question about it. So you have a lot of properties, a lot of individual properties throughout that entire district, and now all of a sudden, those properties have to be essentially rebuilt unless they're used in their existing condition with a little bit of expansion ability, potentially, okay? So now tell me, is somebody who owns one of those little house, essentially houses, that's in that district, ever gonna do anything to change that house? They can't afford to. They
Yeah.
don't have the land area to do it. It's gonna stay the same way it looks today. And so, let me just take 2 more minutes. Attorney Shaw is right. There are tools out there in the world that maybe the township is looking into to help developers, but a developer like me won't use those tools, because we won't even get to the step of being able to figure out what tool to use, because I won't have a user. If I don't have a user, why even go down the road of figuring out the tool? That's the problem.
Yeah.
Whether it's, who knows what, you name it, some sort of public financing or this or that to build a building, that's great. And there's a whole bunch of strings that are attached to that, right? No question. But if I don't have a user who I've convinced it's gonna be amazing to have a building that's at 10 feet and that they have no circulation for their trash and nobody will be able to see the parking spaces, and parking behind a building like next to a hotel is gonna be really safe, okay, because it's gonna be behind the building and it's gonna be amazing. If I could get a user to do it, then maybe I could go down those roads, but I can't even get a user even interested in the location, period. Now add these additional restrictions and requirements, it's gonna be that much more difficult.
How about the Tuna? Does that fit within our, it doesn't have parking in the front, but I guess the parking comes up the side all the way to the road, correct?
And you're parking on the north, or the north and south side of it. It's like a U all the way around it.
So even that would be non-conforming, correct, right now?
That's not, it would not be in the district. It's
Oh, it's
not
not
be
in the-
mixed use.
that's out of it?
Yes.
But
The last, sorry.
Go ahead, you go.
The last thing I'll leave you with is, we also made comments on the district plan as well, and provided them to the township, which are very similar to the comments we've made here, because we think it's really critical that the district plan and the zoning ordinance, in the end, work together. And the intent should be, everyone in our community, to work towards revitalization of the area, and to really focus on what the interplay is between the ordinance, between the district plan, how the two come together, and ask ourselves the very hard question of, we learned this from our consultants maybe? Do they really know our community? Is it really the right thing for our community 2 years later, 3 years later, versus pre-pandemic? Thank you.
I heard something say that we can get government money, we don't have to use the private sector. Well, if you look at the city of Erie, I mean, on their development there, I mean, almost all their tenants are government run. And if that's what Mill Creek, if that's what you want, is government, government run tenants, that doesn't help the economy. That just sucks money out eventually. So, you can't just say, well, we can get money from the government and then we can expand. I mean, that's just foolish. All you're doing is recycling money, taxpayers' money, and causes poverty because there's no jobs. See, when we, as a private sector, you develop business, you hire people to work. If you want to have government-run organizations, I mean, I'm nothing against you guys. I mean, you guys are working for the government in a sense, but you're all private citizens. And so just think about that. I mean, you want to encourage private businesses to come in. I mean, that just makes sense. That it's going to help your.
I think all these guys want to
Yeah, I mean,
encourage private business
to
also.
to make an excuse like we'll just get government money and not worry about the private sector is so foolish.
That's not what we said.
Well, I mean, I got that
The
impression.
indication is that, there are funds out there that can be used to help offset some of the developer costs associated with
Yeah, but
this
it's
in
not
terms of
free. I mean,
us being able to get infrastructure funds and things like that then offset the developer's costs and make it more,
Yeah, but you have to
viable for
understand,
them to do
when you
so.
get the government involved, then it restricts things. That's not free. There's always a payoff, So you got to be careful when you do that route. I'm just saying,
Good evening. I'm Chip Reel, 2580 West 8th Street, and I'm pretty much here to say ditto to what Greg had to say, primarily about the 10-foot setback. First of all, I think the idea of beautifying West 8th Street and down Peninsula Drive and having a connection essentially from the peninsula to the bayfront by way of Peninsula, then 8th Street, then going down the Bayfront Parkway is just a great idea. And I think beautifying that area and taking out all those 4 billion utility poles that we've got there is a great idea, and I think it'll look really nice. And I was in favor very early on of the fact that Mill Creek was trying to develop a Main Street Mill Creek. I think that makes a lot of sense. My concern is that I think with the 10-foot setback, we're creating downtown Mill Creek. And it seems to me that 10-foot, the build line creates a number of problems. First of all, I don't know that I've ever been anywhere other than in a downtown, most of which are failing, where all of the buildings are in a straight line with a sidewalk between the street and the buildings. It just doesn't seem like a plan that works. We live in Erie, Pennsylvania. We get a lot of snow. When the plows plow that road, they're going to have to put the snow someplace. It's going to pretty much fill up that 10-foot area, I think. We're not going to have a beautiful strip there. We're going to have a big pile of snow on it. I also think that I agree with Matt when he says the right time to do this was 50 years ago. My concern is, take the Colony Plaza as an example. If this ordinance was in effect at the time the plaza was built, all of those stores would be 10 feet back from the street. Where's the front door? Is the front door where the cars are parking, or is the front door where the cars are going by on the street? Do you essentially have to create two front areas, one so that the people driving by will see it and believe that it's an attractive area to go to, even though, again, as was said earlier, there's going to be no signs that there's any busy activity happening there because all the parking is going to be on the backside of the building. So I'm not sure why it is that the 10-foot setback in any way improves the likelihood that either it's going to be a more vibrant area or a more attractive area. I'm all for promoting bike traffic. I'm all for promoting pedestrian traffic in the area. But I think, again, that having everything on exactly that point doesn't accomplish that. If you look at the pictures that accompany the various websites concerning this, they have these nice picnic tables out in front of buildings, and they have trees there, and they have a grassy area. Well, again, it's only 10 feet wide. It's not real big. There's not a whole lot of room for a lot of stuff. And what are you going to do in the wintertime? How is garbage going to get out of there? Again, if the Colony Plaza was 10 feet back from the road, where are the garbage trucks going? Are they going into the parking lot to pick up the garbage? Are the tenants having to carry it someplace off-site? Those are my questions. I think the general concept is great. I think the 10-foot building line creates a fairly boring picture from the road. And I think to the extent that some buildings are set back more than others, actually is a more attractive look than straight line. That's my thought. Thank you.
Thank you, sir.
Thank you.
I have a question. If the money was available to raise the Colony Plaza, and then you had to rebuild it according to the proposed community gateway entrance.
Right.
Let me ask you, where would the attractive storefronts be if parking was required to be in the rear?
That's my
You'd have to have
concern.
two, front and back, one for pedestrian, one for the.
Yeah, you got to create two, and does that mean you're going to have two front doors, and that mean you're going to have cashiers and employees at both sites?
Let me continue to ask the
Okay.
question. There's an unsavory part of business, which are dumpsters, pallets, delivery vehicles, trailers.
Right.
Where would the dumpsters probably be if you had to rebuild the colony according to this proposed plan? Would the dumpsters be back by where the attractive storefront is, by the parking lot? Or would the dumpsters be essentially in the rear of the building?
I'm not sure. I mean, and I raised that exact question. I suppose where
You'd have
you
to have
probably
employees.
would end up is way back in the back of the property. So you'd have the building, then the parking, then the dumpsters at the back end of the parking, which means that the merchants don't have it immediately available. They got to cart their trash out to there.
I'm just gonna ask you to take a guess on this. What would be the most attractive part of the Colony Plaza? The most attractive part would be the main entrance facing the parking lot that was trying to attract patrons? Or would the most attractive part be facing A Street, that you see from A Street?
I think if I had a store in the plaza and it was 10 feet back, I would want the part facing 8th Street to be appealing so that people would want to go there.
I agree.
Because those are the people going by, those are the people that you want to drive into your parking lot. And again, if the Colony Plaza is your example, they can't, under this plan, they can't even immediately go into that when they're driving by. They've got to figure out where the parking is and where the entrances are into the parking lot to get around behind the building, to get into the building that they like the face of that was facing the street.
And the financial feasibility of establishing a beautiful storefront that faces the parking lot where your patrons are coming to, and also establishing one that would face A Street, would that be prohibitive for some of our developers?
I haven't studied it. It would certainly cost more.
And again, my
Significantly
concern,
more.
and I'm an alternate tonight, I don't get a vote for this, but I hope to be involved in the discussion.
I think we should give you a vote.
My concern would be that facing facing A Street, the very target of beautification would be where the dumpsters would be, where the pallet storage would be. All you have to do is take a look at some of the access roads by the mall. Drive the access road that runs behind Dick's.
Right.
And what do? You see the dumpsters, you see the pallets, and you see the trailers. Come off of Interchange Road to the most westerly entrance to the mall and look behind TJ Maxx to Ollie's. My concern is that's the type of site that you would see from A Street, the very place we're trying to beautify. So I just wanted your perspective on it if it was rebuilt.
Similarly, and along those same lines, if you're on 79 and you're looking at the backs of those stores there, it's not exactly someplace that you think, hey, boy, that's really nice there. I think I'm going to get off here and go to that place.
And that's the view you get from that access road that's behind Dick's, matter of fact. I've traveled that to take a look at that. It's the same view you get from 79.
Right.
So I think that's a concern. I mean, I really applaud this new plan. However, I'm concerned that the very area that you want to be a jewel is going to have a restraining force of some of the restrictions applied to it. And it could become an unsightly area rather than the jewel that it should be. So
Right,
I'll stop talking, but thank
keep
you.
in mind how downtown districts have worked out in the last 20 or 30 years, which is sort of what we're creating here, not necessarily that well.
Can we see what the benefit is? Again, what is the benefit? We see what the negatives are. We see what all the negatives are. What is the big benefit to bringing these buildings that close to the street?
When you bring the buildings close to the street and you have, as we've talked about today, bicycle and pedestrian facilities that are comfortable for them, you have a street that people can walk down and look into these businesses, whether it's window shopping, whether it's going by a restaurant that looks, interesting, there's people inside enjoying themselves. They are also your customers and they go in as well. It would be very similar to walking along the front of the Colony Plaza today, and looking at the different businesses that are there. Looking inside, is somebody having fun at Brouhaha? What's the special today? I'm going to stop in. That's the idea.
But you can't do that. How many feet back are you from the road? 30? 35?
Probably more than that. Probably
40?
Way more. Probably 50 or 60.
50 feet back from the road? You can do all those things that you're stating at a much further setback. But I think you need more of a setback than less.
So you would ask pedestrians then to cross a parking lot to get to wherever they need to go, walk through a parking lot rather than walk through the door of a business.
I think you kind of have to. This is a successful, Colony Plaza is very successful.
No doubt.
They have a hard time, sometimes what's so nice about it, you have so many cars there, it's hard for people to get a parking spot. I've had a hard time going to Bellows to get a spot there. But you can get there, I can get in, I can go and come back. But if you change this for other businesses, you're putting 2 storefronts on, and you're hurting the ability for people to put their trash and loading and unloading. It's making it, again, too complicated. I think you have to allow people to decide, the demand should decide how you're going to line it up. And I don't think that you would ever want to put something like the Colony Plaza 10 feet closer and have everything on the back side to it. I just don't think it'll work.
Not only that, but we don't have the climate to have people strolling down, the 6 months out of the year.
What this isn't Florida?
No, it isn't.
I did not know that.
Well, an example that I thought of that I think probably a lot of people have been to is Hilton Head. Hilton Head's a planned community. And there is a berm along the main highways that blocks off your view of an awful lot of what happens behind there. But beyond that berm is a huge parking lot, and then is the stores. So it's not, the parking isn't behind the stores. You can tell that there's activity going on in the stores. It's not hidden behind.
You can see it.
The parking's not hidden behind the buildings.
Yeah. But you don't, Mill Creek is already developed. So you don't have the luxury of putting the berm, the parking, and then what you're doing there.
Right.
I think you're really hamstringing people by putting that 10-foot build 2 thing. And I think, in general, you need to make it easier for development and let the demand depict how you develop these properties within certain restrictions. But I don't think that you guys should be restricting it from the get-go.
Well, can I say something?
No.
Just this one
The
time.
real issue, and nobody's addressing it down there, is there simply isn't enough traffic.
Correct.
There's not enough traffic on Peninsula Drive, there's not enough traffic on 8th Street. And I think the idea is to try to bring other kinds of users into that area to make up for the lack of traffic that you have. That's why, you know, McDonald's, that's the lowest volume store in this area. You know, it's great in the summer, but unfortunately, it only lasts 3 or 4 months.
Yeah, but you run into a lot of other different things. In the summertime, the traffic is dead all the way up to 32nd and Peninsula. It's full.
Yeah, but people are going to the peninsula.
Correct.
They're not stopping, they're not gonna
Correct.
stop at McDonald's for the most part.
They're not getting out
So-
of line.
But
So
how,
you
how's
can't
that
use-
10-foot rule gonna help though? I don't,
Well, what I'm trying to say is what I think the concept is to bring more traffic onto 8th Street from bicycles, maybe walking, to get a more down a village feel to it, because you're not gonna get the vehicles anyways. The way it is now, somebody that's going down, that's heading north on Peninsula Drive, they're not stopping, they're going all the way to the peninsula. And those people aren't consumers in the sense that we're talking about. Now, the Colony Plaza, in my opinion, is probably the nicest retail area around here. And you've done, I think, a wonderful job in the landscaping and the flowers that you put up there. And what they've done at the Westbury Plaza is admirable. But still, there's not enough people coming there to fill all of these buildings. And we gotta figure out a way to get more people there.
I understand what you're saying, but if you go to the Westbury Plaza, I was there today, I've been there over the weekend, the place is packed now, and the reason it's packed is because they brought the businesses in. The businesses, if you can get the business,
But
if you
all
can
of
get the
those
businesses there.
are mom and pops for the most part.
Correct.
That's why, the idea of the national users along the strip, I don't think is really reasonable.
I wouldn't
Okay,
disagree with you.
I don't wanna disagree with you,
Yeah.
but I don't think that's the way to go.
But again, it's bringing, if you bring the restaurants or the mom and pop stores, you have to allow them to develop, and they're not gonna come and develop, within 10 feet of, we've mentioned the problems it creates. I just
Yeah,
don't see.
But you're saying, I think, the opposite of what I'm saying. If you're gonna have those places, you gotta have a way for those people to get to them,
Mhm.
okay? So you gotta develop the infrastructure first, and then the users will come along. That's what I think will happen. But you can't, you're not gonna get national users coming in there and building all along 8th Street.
I don't think national users, but we want to spur mom and pops in there.
Absolutely, but the mom and pop's not gonna build with the hope that the people are gonna come. They want to me, beautify it all first, and after you get done doing that, then reevaluate it.
Exactly. You know, the
Go ahead, Greg.
demographic-
I'll keep these guys quiet.
I assume we're still in public comment area, but, Mr. President, you're absolutely right. You're absolutely right. And
Tell my wife that, please.
And then you can tell my wife. But realistically, your approach makes a lot of sense. It's beautify first, and this has been sort of my point with, you have these two things going on. You have the beautification through the district plan, and then you have the changes or modifications to the zoning ordinance. Don't make the changes to the zoning ordinance. Go put some skin in the game, Mill Creek Township. Put the $6 million in, okay, beautify, add the landscaping, add the bike paths. Now, I might have a chance. And you're right, it's probably not gonna be some big national, but I might be able to get a regional like a Cork or like a Bar Ronan. I may very well be able to do that. I mean, the first concept we had for the corner of Joe Roots was a 2-story restaurant with a patio on the roof, fire pits, the works. It would be beautiful, looking right up and over the peninsula. Right now, I don't have a chance. So your concept is absolutely spot on. Fix the area aesthetically, and then we will come in, and then we will bring people, and frankly, the township, rather than looking at requiring us to build two, should be looking at buying properties to create parking lots where people can actually park, to then be able to come into the area and enjoy the area, and there'll be some foot traffic then. Look at the West Area Plaza. The reason anybody will walk there is because
They can park
there's a
there.
huge parking lot. We all hate huge parking lots, right? But I gotta build them because that's what my occupants want, and that's what the people want. So here we are, modifying a zoning ordinance to create all these problems where Chip already has enough problems with parking. Wouldn't you love to have 200 more parking spaces? Right, so I think these are things the township should be considering, but they're not right now.
And you had mentioned
Thank you.
that, you want the foot traffic and the bicycle traffic, how are they gonna get there? Where are they gonna park to do this stuff? And that's interesting, you'd have to buy land to put parking in order to do what you're doing. It doesn't all-
Again, you need to understand that zoning is one part of a piece of a pie.
Okay,
And there are, as I indicated, there are many tools that are available to the township and the community to do the types of things to lead to the development that I think will ultimately be there. So, you know, the zoning is just one part of it. And as I said earlier, you can't be thinking about this in a vacuum.
would you have a cold beer on the second deck of Joe Rude's?
Especially if you're buying.
Only if it's 10 feet from the street.
My last comment, if I can, if this is still public input time, is I don't want to throw out the baby with the bathwater. I think the concept of the district and of unifying it and beautifying it is a great idea. I think tying it into Peninsula, I don't know how out-of-towners figure out where the peninsula is. There's really no markings for it at all.
It's unbelievable.
They follow the other cars.
Follow the other cars, right. But I think tying all of that in together with what the city's already doing along, or about to do along West 8th Street, creates a really nice pattern to connect the peninsula to downtown Erie, and especially the bayfront portion of downtown Erie. So I think that part of it is wonderful. I just have a real problem with the 10 feet.
Thank you.
I don't know how to ask this, other than bureaucratically, is it possible to do the beautification first and then worry about the zoning and the corridor concept and everything else later?
Again, what Mr. Shaw said, they are all part of the same thing. They all have to interplay together. We are in the middle of rewriting the zoning ordinance. You know, we're not going to stop. We can't go back. You know, the township is working towards a goal of improving this area, and
But that is coming first.
well, I mean, something has to come first. There, you know, we've got to do things. This is what's on our plate today. You know, there's the gateway plan that we're talking about, and there's other implementation steps to come. But you know, we've got to walk before we can run.
We're not gonna have some big retailers coming in anyways, so do the beautification part first. The zoning, I don't see a problem with the zoning.
I mean, currently, you know, there's a pending, you know, RACP application with the state. It's been submitted, and there's a match already to cover that. So the $6 million would be, you know, coming from a state RACP fund to do those improvements. So we're hoping to hear soon whether that's been awarded or not. And if that's been awarded, then we would go through that process. And, you know, from a development standpoint, that would, you know, there'd have to be a design finalized and so forth for that all to occur. So that's, I mean, it doesn't happen overnight, obviously.
Well, this 10-foot setback is an issue. I mean, I don't care how you, the zoning and the beautification, everything, but it does create a problem that I think we need to address.
Is there a way, and I was thinking about this on my way here today, put this in a transitional state? Because I think what's going to happen is you're going to have individual developers come in and they're going to find these problems that I think there's very few people that actually read and got that in depth on it other than Mr. Baldwin. But you're going to find these problems that are going to peak up in this. Can't you put it in a temporary set up so as these things become problems, you can address them and adapt the zoning? Or is the zoning hit for the next 10, 20 years?
I mean, nothing's ever set in stone. There's always, you know, the MPC gives us the ability to amend a zoning code. That's what we're doing today. I mean, we're doing it in a large scale because, you know, we're trying to update it for modern times. But just think about, I think, maybe 18 months ago, you had
Right.
the sign code in front of you. That was a portion of the zoning ordinance. It can be amended as time goes on. It should not stay static.
Yeah, it should always move and
Correct.
bend with whatever the demand is.
Yes.
But it seems to me like the demand, I just don't want to see you hinder it any more than you can. And I don't think you've persuaded me enough to see that 10-foot rule is going to help. I still don't see it. I don't know why I'm missing it, but I don't see it.
Could the corridor concept be eliminated now, but instituted in the future?
I mean, I think again, well,
What I was going to say is that I think you would defeat the purpose of what we're planning to do by not implementing it now, because you would be permitting development that we feel that's not compatible with that corridor.
again, you know, when do you start? You have to start at some point. And I think, I do want to make it clear, because I think at some point we ended up being kind of a referendum or a discussion about the merits of the Colony Plaza, and where it should be. And the Colony Plaza should be right where it is now. I mean, you know, we're not saying that you move the Colony Plaza forward. We're talking about new development as it comes in,
I see that.
what we want to do, you know.
But did you know, like we'd mentioned, the Kmart area and what problems that 10-foot build.
But it doesn't apply there. It only applies in that green,
It only
yes,
applies in the other
correct.
corridor. But with that, exactly the statement, why have it apply in this corridor? Because you want to get the traffic, it's a catch-22 here.
Trying to create a village concept.
Yeah, but a village, it's not a village.
I know, but I think
Not at the moment.
not at the moment. I mean, you're looking ahead 10, 20 years, I mean, I don't know that automobiles are gonna be the way they are now. There might be electric trams going up and down the streets for all we know.
Everybody drives to the peninsula and tries to find a place to park. Nobody's walking down there.
Well, for an idea, and this is something else that I had mentioned to you, and I don't know if I mentioned to you guys, but it would be spectacular, Chip, and I think I mentioned this to you, it would be great to have a boardwalk that goes from Beach One parking lot over to Summerheim that is bicycle and foot traffic. And then it swings right up and it can go east and west. It's just on poles above the ice, just foot and bicycle traffic. But the problem you run into, and I can't get it to go any further, is because of, you can't have anything near the water station down there. But geographically, that's the best spot for it to come across. It'll take all of the clutter out of the bottleneck out of the peninsula. But these are all things that have to go into play, but we're running up against the water department. You can't do anything there. And you have the school to park. You want parking? You've got school to park there. And it's a seasonal thing.
You don't wanna direct more traffic onto Sixth Street, you wanna bring it up to Eighth Street.
If you have bicycle and foot traffic, a 2-block walk is no problem. But they're already there. They're there, and if you're talking about this community again,
What do you mean, they're there? Where are they?
if they're coming in by car, they have a place to park, and then you have to go from there.
You mean park down on Sixth Street?
You can park at the school, but
Then
you,
why, they're never gonna get to Eighth Street.
if you're trying to put this community together, where people, you have to get people there. In order to get them there, they're gonna come for a business, or a restaurant, or shop, or to do something. You have to get them there first.
Well, the Colony proves they've gotta have a destination.
Yes,
I mean, that's why people go there.
Right.
That's why the Western Plaza
Is
is
working.
coming on.
yes,
So you've gotta,
but you
you
need
gotta
parking.
have, but you can't go build a building and start a business up when there's nobody there to get there yet.
Right, so what you have to do.
Get the people there first.
Okay, and how are the people gonna get there? They're gonna get there if they can make money doing this, and how are they gonna make money if they can build it the way they need it to be, not the way we think it should be, what they think.
Well, if you do all this beautification and
Yes.
all this kind of stuff first,
Mhm.
if you build it, they'll come.
Okay,
Okay,
well, then we
let
should
them-
beautify first.
Yeah.
We should
that make
beautify
a good
first.
line for 'em
I agree
to
with that.
Put down, but you gotta have the buildings first, or you gotta have the reason for them to go there. So a developer or even a small mom and pop isn't gonna go in unless they know they're gonna be fairly successful.
Correct.
And the best way to kind of guess at that is how much foot traffic it is to begin with. And there's just not enough now. We gotta figure out a way to get more people coming there.
And the 10-foot build doesn't seem to help that. I mean, we're
Well,
picking one thing
I'm not
here.
disagreeing with
Yeah.
that.
Yeah.
I'm just saying, let's do the beautification, let's do
Yeah.
all that kind of stuff with the idea that it's gonna come in the future.
Yeah.
If we need the 10 feet, then okay, we need it in the future, but we don't
We
necessarily
don't need
need
it
it
now.
now.
Yeah, but I think it's the same thing with some of these other.
But keep in mind that as you look to develop these properties ultimately at some point in time, the 10-foot build-to line will give you more space in the back to do additional structures, building. I mean, remember, this is all, you can do mixed use here. I mean, you can do multifamily, you can do, apartments, you can do, hotel, those
That's
types
a
of
great
things that you
point,
could,
because if you had more people living in that area,
Right.
you'd have more people, you need more services for them. But we're not in a population growth area to begin with, so that's a problem too. I mean, the population of Erie County is substantially any greater than it was in 1960.
but the population is shifting.
Yeah.
It's interesting, I think you should beautify before you set in stone parameters that are gonna hinder business. But I understand why you guys are doing
I
what you're
agree with
doing.
that, I agree with that.
Yeah.
Mr. Reed. I have a question for Matt, and Mark, the three of them. When it comes time to vote tonight, is this an all or none vote? Is this group restricted by any requirement by state law or federal law? Let's say that this group says the comprehensive plan is great, you guys did, everything's been great, except this one corridor, the gateway to the peninsula. We would, let's say we would all say we would recommend, we all would vote for the comprehensive plan. Can we, though, exclude one area to be discussed or to be planned later?
You can recommend.
To address the issues that have been brought up tonight?
The planning commission has, they make a recommendation, so you have control over what your recommendation is.
So let's
There's
say
there's no
let's say
limitation.
we
You
would-
you can recommend to approve the zoning ordinance as drafted, except for, with respect to this, we recommend the following.
So then when it gets to the supervisors, let me ask the next question. Can they approve the comprehensive plan with the exclusion of this one area and being within regulations? Or is it all or none?
If it's presented to them as drafted, they would, if they excluded this portion, it may be viewed as a substantial change, and we'd have to renotice it and go through the process of notice again. Wouldn't come back to this commission again, but it would have to, be renoticed, have another hearing, and,
Matt and Matt.
extend it out.
Is there a funding thing going on here where we need to get this zoning done now in order to be funded? Like in Barry's Mill Creek, it was accomplished and then there was some funding that came by secondarily because it was accomplished. There isn't anything like that on zoning, is it?
As far as funding contingent on whether we change the zoning or not, no.
But we will say that there are a number of developers out there who are interested in moving forward with current projects that they plan that would be viable under the new zoning ordinance
Right.
that are not viable under the existing one.
Okay.
So there is, and they've been waiting a long time, so.
Is there more than one? No.
So Mark, it's your opinion that if this group recommended the comprehensive plan, and I, we don't want to throw the baby out with the bathwater. There's been a lot of work and a lot of good planning involved with this. Except there seems to be one fly in the ointment. So is it your opinion that this fly in the ointment of this Prescott Gateway is large enough a problem for the supervisors that they have to put the whole thing back out for public comment?
If they go to change that, I would think so. It's a small section, but it's a, you know, you're changing a map. And I, you know, my view is, again, there's not a whole lot of case law on this, and it's, you know, the statute is, as Greg knows, is not the model of clarity. But at the same time, I think from a conservative perspective, we would, if something that has, you know, would be a significant map change, my recommendation would be is if they're gonna make that change after it's already been advertised, and this hasn't been publicly advertised yet, even though it's on our website. But once it's advertised and you make a substantial change after the hearing that the supervisors have, they then have to renotice it for another meeting and another hearing,
So this is the time to make a statement or to ask for this done before we get any further down the road.
Yeah,
If you think it's viable, or if you think it's that important.
If, you know, again, if a change is gonna be made that doesn't trigger ultimately moving the date from the 19th, then it has to be done before it's publicly advertised, which would be next Monday, it'll go out to the paper.
What would happen if we eliminate the corridor portion of the gateway, in your opinion?
You mean just get rid of the build-to line? Or
The different
Corridor
designation.
concept for now.
then everything, you would have a 10-foot building line, they could build at 10 feet, or they could build anywhere beyond, you know, further back behind that.
And then,
You know, on new parcels.
and then after we've got all the beautification done and we take a good look, and could we institute it then, the corridor?
Well, I don't want to play semantics, but I mean, the supervisors could institute it, then you could definitely recommend it, the township
Well, I
could,
mean,
yes.
legally, there's no issue with that, is there?
Again, you can, you know, I should not say you, the township, through the Board of Supervisors, as long as they follow the process, can amend the zoning ordinance at any time.
But you need to recognize too, that if you make that change and decide, let's hold off on that, you know, the current property owners can do whatever they wish to do until that change occurs, and which may then undermine what you ultimately decide you want to do.
Or it might enhance it, we don't know.
Don't know. We think it would undermine, but,
We who?
I mean, I think, given the current
Yeah.
proposal, I mean,
Yeah.
that would be the view.
That's basically. Other than the 10-foot setback, is there any other real issue with the corridor that? Parking in the rear. Parking in the rear is a big issue.
Well, the parking in the rear is because only the building, yeah, has to be the building and nothing else other than pedestrian access.
You solve that one.
They go hand in glove.
Those two, if you eliminate the 10-foot.
I would like to know what we need to do to get that second floor balcony at Joe Roots.
Yeah, because when they build that, I'm going.
That's such a good idea.
Don't hold your breath.
Take a ladder with you.
I live on the west, I live west of State Street.
Somebody said beer and I was in.
Yeah. All right.
Okay.
All right.
I like the direction we've gone, I just don't know
We're there yet.
what order to proceed further, to get to where they want to get to. But
Well, we have to make a recommendation, that's what we have to recommend.
my recommendation
That's,
is to eliminate the corridor.
the order of things is another set of
Parameters.
things
that
that's
have to
gonna
change.
happen.
But that's basically comes down to the 10-foot setback. If you eliminate the corridor, you eliminate the setback, and then you solve, the parking problem.
I'd agree with you.
Well, I am all for, I am all for the parking
What I
being in the
just
rear,
said.
but I think that the
If
10-foot
we eliminate the corridor,
setback should be probably increased.
I just think there's too many issues.
I think it should be more like 20, maybe 20 feet. That's going to cut down
You're talking about allowing
rear
parking in
parking
the front.
Yeah, is that correct?
I think it's going to be both
Okay.
tourism.
Mr. Castelli, looking for you.
And we can always put it back here later after we get done doing all this.
That's what I think is great, is the put back later, as we were kind of hitting at. If this is that
If we
important.
want to.
Yeah, if it's that important, but your problem with that is that somebody's gonna develop it the way it shouldn't be developed. but there's not that much area.
Oh, yeah, there's the villa, there's still a lot of.
The villa's out of the, it's out of the core.
Just from Summerheim to the west.
Yeah. And that's such a small area. I don't know why we can't.
We can.
Let's do it.
Yeah, we deny anybody's land
So
development
Mark,
plan.
Mark, if the recommendation was to eliminate the 10-foot setback, is that a large enough alteration in
Well,
the comprehensive plan?
If it's done after the ordinance is published, yes. So you'll have your recommendations, supervisors, unless.
It's only a recommendation.
Unless there's a decision, to modify it between now and the time it gets published, based on your recommendation, it's going to delay the approval of the zoning ordinance.
Okay, let me stop this for a
Okay.
minute. I want to see if there's any more public comment before we're actually deliberating right now.
Okay.
And we should get any public comments out of the way.
One more.
John Bongiovanni, 417 Frontier Drive. I bought Edgemere Place, which is between Van Tile and Lighthouse Jewelers. And so my question to Mark would be, if we change this 10-foot setback in the corridor, is that going to delay my building a new office building where I am?
Yeah, because we would not have been in a, the new zoning ordinance wouldn't be in effect.
Okay.
It would still be the old
There's
zoning
no way to
ordinance.
proceed with the zoning with this one item.
Again, from a procedural perspective, once the ordinance is advertised, if we start making map changes, I would suggest and recommend that's a significant change. It would kick it into having to, come back to the supervisors at their, next meeting at the earliest. It may even be the meeting after that.
It is, one question is like for Chip, if he, if he doesn't redevelop that space of his mall, is that, doesn't matter? Or is it only if he decides to build something new?
That's correct, yeah. This would only be for new things going forward. Anything that exists at the time of change is what's known as an existing non-conforming use. So it could stay in its current state in perpetuity.
Is it in perpetuity, or is it 1 year, 2 years, I thought?
No, there's no,
It's in perpetuity forever.
Yeah,
So-
once they're built, we can't
Well,
make them
yeah,
undo.
But if they're vacant, I thought you said if they were vacant for.
They're
they've
abandoned.
abandoned their
Abandoned.
use.
If they're
Yes.
abandoned, then
Right.
it reverts to the existing
But
zone.
isn't his property
So
outside?
Mr. Baldwin
Yes.
could
His-
redo the property as it sits. Change it interior, exterior. It's just if he were to level it, he'd have to be 10 feet off the street.
Correct.
No, because you're outside the corner.
No, he said Mr. Baldwin. Yeah, I think he meant the Joe Roots property is what he was referring to.
But you're outside the corner.
Yeah, I'm fine.
Yeah.
Yeah.
But to their point, if you had a 10-foot setback where I am located across from the court, I'm not likely to put a new office there with a 10-foot setback. I've got a 30-foot setback, that makes sense. I can have parking front and rear, so. Okay, thanks.
Okay, anyone else? Okay. Before you, is there any further discussion anywhere here between us and our support people? I believe you want to call for a roll.
Are you ready to vote, or?
Are we ready to vote on this, or to make a recommendation, or not make?
Recommendation.
Okay.
Can I take this?
Mm-hmm.
Do you need it?
Yeah, in the motion. So we need a motion.
We need a
on the
motion.
on the recommendation.
Did you make it?
Okay, I'd like to make the motion that we recommend the adoption of these zoning districts with however corridor.
I would second that.
What do you mean by eliminate?
Well, it becomes the Prescal Gateway. It becomes part of the Prescal Gateway.
It's not separate.
It's not separated out.
Separate area. then later on, if we wanna do something a few years from now.
After they build
we'll
the
look at it.
two-story bar,
Okay, if it's separated out, is that not fact that it falls in with everything else and every other construction area is in the same boat?
Gene, it wouldn't be
Develop-
separated out, that's the way it's being touted now. What I'm saying is, we eliminate that, and the entire Presque Isle Gateway, that becomes part of the Presque Isle Gateway.
it's not a
The
special
corridor becomes
designation.
part of the gateway.
What I believe Mr. Prozan's saying is that we eliminate the Presque Isle corridor off the zoning map.
Correct.
Is that correct?
Yes.
Okay.
Make it part of the gateway.
I mean, it would still, it's in the Presque Isle Gateway District, it's just an overlay.
But that would make it subject to all of the other Presque Isle Gateway District regulations and not the special corridor setback
And
regulations.
what's the downfall on that you see?
This is your motion, I just want to make sure that we're clear
Well, but
as to what your motion is.
It's not gonna
I already seconded,
It's seconded.
be,
yes.
thank you.
Okay, but can't we clarify that, we're trying to better what Mill Creek is doing here, so it can, even though Doug made the motion and I seconded it, what do you see as the major downfall of removing that? Can you say or not?
I mean, I think we proposed what we felt was appropriate and what would be good for the future down there. But, you know, you're an independent commission and you're certainly empowered to make your own recommendations, so.
Okay.
I mean, the effect of your motion, it would be that anyone building on any of those parcels, you know, it has to be at least 10 feet. They can do more.
10 feet or more.
I just wanna make sure you
Yeah.
understand, I'm not talking about abandoning this forever. I'm just
But you
kicking
are.
it down the road a little bit.
And let the
After we do some of
beautification
these other
happen.
things, look
Yeah.
at it.
Yeah, and you can do it that way easier than you can do it the other way.
Yeah, undoing it would be more
Undoing is
difficult
hard.
than adding it.
That's why we're trying to undo it now, because to undo it later would be it probably won't happen. But we can always add it back in after it's beautified.
You can always take it out if you think it's not working as well. I mean, it doesn't, I mean, whether you're adding it or taking it out at this point doesn't matter. I mean, you have that ability to modify the ordinance whenever you know, or, you know, to recommend modifying the ordinance whenever you wish.
And
If you take it out now, though, and the map is changed one final time, essentially.
It'll likely delay the passage.
Start over again. I'm okay with that.
By the supervisor.
I will still second Doug's motion.
Well, I also wanna say that if it's eliminated for the time being, and we do all these other things, and because there are a number of buildings that are close to this 10-foot setback. And if all of a sudden people start coming in and occupying those and it becomes more viable, then we'll know the concept works, so we can always do it later.
Yeah, it can always be modified later.
But if they don't, then it wouldn't have worked anyway.
Good motion, Doug.
I have my moments.
Okay, so are we taking a vote on that? Gene?
So,
Well,
Just gonna ask if there's any other comments from this end of the building.
We haven't heard a whole lot from down there.
alright.
Okay.
So, from my understanding, the motion is recommend adopting of the zoning ordinance with the elimination of the Presque Isle corridor.
Correct.
All right, Mr.
To
Skelly?
be, well, you don't need to put that in, but if you just eliminate the corridor, but it still becomes part of the Presque Isle Gateway, or still part of the,
Well,
it's
yeah,
within
that's-
the Presque Isle Gateway
Right,
anyway.
that's not, yes.
Hey, Gene, you better, Gene,
It's not a village by itself
ask
Gene?
again.
anymore. Sir,
Ask again if there's anybody else that wants to talk.
Yeah, because I'm about
I
ready to
just
call
did.
the vote.
we just did.
Ask
Yeah.
him again.
Anybody down here? If there's nothing, oh, you look like you want to say something.
I want to vote on a motion.
Okay,
We have a motion, we have a
Okay.
second. We'll call
okay,
for
all right.
All right, call the vote. Mr. Skelly, how do you vote? No? Mr. Cabea, how do you vote?
Yes.
Mr. Prozan, how do you vote?
Yes.
Mr. Stewart, how do you vote?
Yes.
Oh, man, mouth.
Ms. McCabe, how do you vote?
No.
Mr. Sitter, how do you vote?
No.
Chairman Strohmeyer, how do you vote?
Yes.
All right, with a vote of 4-3, the recommendation of the Planning Commission is to adopt the adoption of the zoning ordinance as submitted with the elimination of the Pascal corridor. Okay?
Okay. All right, is there any? Do we have any other business to discuss tonight, anywhere? All right, I will entertain a motion to
I
adjourn.
will make a motion to adjourn.
I haven't entertained, or I want to entertain it yet.
Okay.
You have a second on the motion to adjourn?
Second.
We stand adjourned, all in favor?
Aye.
Anyone opposed? We stand adjourned at 7:08 and 30 seconds.
Wow, that was